we are, which is what we think and feel in the present moment, and we're entangled with the world in a manner that we don't like or we're really uncomfortable with. And we start taking a look at, why do I see it that way? What's that about? And we begin to unearth these habitual patterns and become aware of them. Now that's what the entire approach of internal family systems is built around. So when we find that we have these habitual patterns or these self-identities which don't work, then we set about isolating them and resolving them one by one. And so without habitual patterns, we tend to see things much more clearly. It's a topic that, in my experience, can only be sort of talked about to kind of get an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about habitual patterns and self-realization and things like that. And there's a lot of good writings and teachings on that, and I always recommend that if you have anybody, but particularly on this subject because it's so outside our field of possibilities in our mind, we can't imagine. They all say you can't imagine it, so just do the best you can. And but it's good to read what different people say about it. What does self-realized mean? What is enlightenment? What is? Because there's a little bit different opinion on everyone. We were just talking about enlightenment, so just to catch you up. Thought we'd start right in. So Frank asked the question in my email. I used the term realized beings, and he asked the question, "What the heck is a realized being?" I said, "Well, I don't know, really." But the things that
thanks for that, Alfie.
Oh, you're welcome, Frank. I think these things are really important to talk about because we run into them all the time, whether we have a particular tradition or not. And one of the things I'm thinking of in general for this coming year is to go over some of the foundational concepts that we've been through on a regular basis, like the conceptual framework and what that is, and the bell curve and what that's about, and the parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system. Because I find that the more our conceptualization is synchronous with reality, the better off we are. Even if it's not 100%, we just got to get better, in terms of how we operate and such. And I run into that all the time with clients. They have this conceptualization of mental health, mental illness, and stuff that is really inaccurate in terms of how our personality works and what mental health really is, and those sort of things. And so they keep trying to fix something that, in a way that just doesn't exist, and say, let's try this, and that'll work better. So those are important topics, and to me they all start with mindfulness. When we're talking about mental health or emotional balance and things like that, the foundation really is in a mindfulness practice. I was thinking about, in every tradition, contemplative tradition, they talk about starting with a mindfulness practice, that makes everything else possible. And then I remember too, in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, when prayer and meditation are practiced together, they form an unshakable foundation. I don't know about y'all, but the idea of an unshakable foundation sounds pretty good to me, because things are so out of control. So I wanted to emphasize today the more far-reaching benefits of mindfulness. Like a lot of folks here have been meditating for some time, some haven't, but I think it's important to re-emphasize how important a mindfulness meditation is, because that is the foundation for all the other teachings. It's certainly the foundation for compassion practices. Compassion practices are just too hard if we don't have some kind of a mental and emotional stability. So that's why today we're just going to do a mindfulness meditation, and then we're going to do a compassion exercise, so you can get some experiential information of what it's like, because when we're in the mindfulness practice, there's a number of really important things that are sort of the first things we notice when we have a mindfulness practice. One is that our mind becomes more steady, less likely to run around, and when that happens, then we're better able to perceive what's going on either inside of us or with other people, and make a sound decision rather than an impulsive decision. There's also it confers the ability to be resilient in the face of emotional distress. And that's really important, because compassion brings up sometimes some very distressing stuff, because these practices flush out whatever's in the way of the practice, as I've said on many an occasion. So we start doing the practice, first thing that happens is that the obstacles show up. In mindfulness, it's a wandering mind, or self-criticism comes up, or what have you. And that's the first thing that needs to be worked through. In compassion, the first thing that happens, our conscience begins to drive us crazy. Because once we start showing compassion to people in general, like even family members and such, it brings up any and all unresolved issues. I mean, that's its function. So in order to be able to address those things in a relatively productive manner, we have to have some emotional resilience to be able to process those things. So it sets the stage for its own practice and also compassion. And also with mindfulness, we develop what's called meta-awareness, which simply means we become more aware of what we're actually thinking and feeling at any particular time. I've been thinking about recently the phrase that warns people against hiding a bad motive under a good one, how important a concept and how prevalent that is. If we are self-deceived rather than self-realized, we can fool ourselves. Oh, I think this is a great idea. I think that's exactly what I need to do. And we find out when things don't go the way we expect that, perhaps we had a different motive underneath our apparent magnanimity, and generosity, or whatever it is. That we had a selfish motive underneath it. And mindfulness helps us to be aware of that. And then the emotional balance that comes with mindfulness helps us to be able to see that and not run from it. And go, oh, man, I didn't know I was doing that. I got to do something about that. So that's we start making real good spiritual progress, because we're able to flush out the things that we need to work through, and the emotional stability to take them on without running from them, or sliding into a shame response and stuff, and begin to actually work through them. And we just keep doing it, and progress is made. That's the way progress is made. So that's part of what I wanted to talk about with mindfulness, and how important mindfulness is. And I think I find it useful to think of mindfulness in two ways. There's for acute situations and for chronic situations. That's borrowing from medical context. We have acute situation where, let's say, we're really upset about something and we're just distraught by it. Well, if we force ourselves to sit for a while, and then and meditate as best we can, we'll tend to calm down most of the time. And that's really important, because just to help us, get through life. Or, if we're in a meeting and somebody's talking out of hand, or we feel somebody's attacking us, that sort of thing, we can pause, which is super important, and go, what are they really saying? Am I hearing this correctly? Am I not? then we respond in different ways instead of responding defensively. Say, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Tell me about that. And so we begin to get an idea of what they were really saying and what maybe they were trying to say but didn't say well, or whatever. We can work through it. That's the meta-awareness. And so pausing really opens the door to the parasympathetic nervous system and all kinds of good stuff. And so pausing is what the actual, it's the actual practice of a mindfulness practice where a thought comes up, we recognize it and release it. And that's the pause. Thought comes up, and instead of engaging with it, we pause and go, oh, that's a thought, and let it go and come back to the present moment. Oh, another thought. And, oh, I'm really lousy. Oh, that's just another thought, and let it go. I'll never get to that's another thought, and let it go. And we just keep doing it over and over and over again instead of getting all identified with the thought and taking it on as a reality and worrying about the past or the future. And we just pause and hit the pause button, stay in the present moment. And that's we're actually training our brain to do that every time we see a thought, recognize it as a thought, and let it go. Every single time. And as I said before, I think we did this once. If people have some difficulty or on a particular day where meditation seems pretty difficult, to think of an orange. And to bring that orange clearly into to mind. It's rich and beautiful orange color. Its fragrance, is it large or small? Is it and the texture of it, and to get a sense of through all of the senses what it would feel like, how much it would weigh, does it have a fragrance to it. And just think about oranges that we've had in the past and how juicy they are when we eat them, and orange juice and such. And do that to the maximum, and just appreciating this orange. And then let it go. And bring your awareness back to the present moment. That's easier to do than when we're trying to meditate and thoughts about our family members or politicians or whatever come to mind. Those are more sticky than an orange. And so if we're having trouble letting thoughts go, see if you can practice on an orange for a little bit, just to remember that whatever shows up is just an image on a screen. That's all. No matter how dire or awful the experience may have been or we think could be, it's just a thought. It's just a hologram. And so those are some of the benefits of mindfulness. And for me, summing up all of that gives us... Am I muted? How did that happen? Sorry about that. To sum up all that, it provides us with a whole set of tools of stability, self-awareness, insight, pausing, interrupting habitual patterns. When we're saying pausing, what that really does is it interrupts our habitual patterns. And all of that is a preparing the ground, so to speak, tilling the ground and preparing the ground for planting. And the seeds of compassion are really what we plant when we're done tilling the soil. So that's for mindfulness. And when I say mindfulness practice, what I'm referring to in the beginning is just 3 minutes twice a day. Just start with 3 minutes twice a day. And typically when somebody does that, after a while it will expand kind of on its own. But we first develop the rhythm of doing that twice a day, and we get in that, our whole mind and body gets involved in this rhythm. And so it's just part of one of the things we do. It's not, oh, I gotta meditate again, oh, this isn't gonna work, that kind of stuff comes up. Didn't work yesterday, why should it work today? You just sit. And that's the big secret to practicing meditation, is you just sit. and we be aware as best we can of what's going on in our minds. I've mentioned this several times, but now seems to be a good time to mention it again. Someone asked the Dalai Lama if he's meditated every day, and if so, for how long? And he said, well, I sit for an hour, and I meditate maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Right? So that's the way it goes. But we're still meditating, and we're still working with the mind, and we make some sort of progress in some way. So we just keep doing it, bringing our awareness to what's actually happening in our mind. So when we do that, then we're preparing ourselves, as I said a moment ago, for doing the compassion exercises. And when I did the teacher training, and in the introductory 8-week course, both teachers said about halfway through, said, okay, this is what we call the mucky middle. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, well, this is where stuff starts to come up. And some of the exercises were aimed at deeper parts of our personality and psyche. And she was right. There were a couple of exercises, everybody in the room was hopping, that sort of thing. And it was good because, we're holding on to this stuff, so it's really good to flush that out, but it's important to have the awareness and the mental and emotional stability to be able to go through that without getting overwhelmed. Be able to process it without being overwhelmed. Because when we get overwhelmed, we actually take a step back. Because when we're overwhelmed, it's like, oh, I've failed. It feels like a failure, and we retreat, and we become more apprehensive from practicing in the future, and those kind of things begin to come up. It's important when something comes up to decide, and this is one of the functions of compassion, that we can decide whether or not this is the right time to host this set of feelings or not. And I said before that for me, one of the really great an understanding that's really helped me a lot with understanding compassion. Paul Gilbert said, remember I've said this a number of times, but there's 3 modes of compassion. Giving compassion to others, receiving compassion from others, and giving compassion to oneself. And when we're feeling bereft of one thing or another, and it's really kind of a question that can help us sort things out emotionally, is, am I receiving enough compassion from others, giving enough compassion to others, or do I myself need to give myself some compassion here? And we'll get an answer. And then if it's something about where we're not really haven't been as active in helping others as we could be, that's what we'll get busy doing. Or are we the sort of person that when somebody extends compassion to us, we go, oh, no, that's okay, everything's okay, don't worry about it. We need to be more open and say, yes, thank you. I really appreciate that. And with ourselves, we're being hard on ourselves, and that sort of edgy dynamic of shame shows up in perfectionism or drive or wanting to compete or achieve something in particular, those kind of things. And if we see that, then we can see that what we really need to give ourselves is compassion. And we're better able to see that because of the practice of the mindfulness, developing this meta-awareness. So everything begins to work a lot more easily. And I believe that the natural mind has its own dynamics, its own ecosystem. And all the ideas that we have about it are an impediment to that. It doesn't work very well. I had some clients tell me that, say things like, I'm bipolar, or I'm depressive, or I've got borderline personality disorder. And that makes sense in terms of the medical model, and it serves the purpose of diagnosis and insurance and hospitalization and treatment. But it doesn't really make much sense in terms of our experience. Okay, if somebody says, oh, I'm bipolar. Okay, well, let's deal with that. How did that arise? Well, I don't know. I'm just bipolar. Well, where'd that come from? Well, how did it start? Well, I don't know, 5th grade maybe? Okay, so what was going on in 5th grade? And I always ask if somebody's dealing with, bipolar, I said, which came first, the anxiety or the depression? It's a really important question that most psychologists don't ask. Because what I've noticed is in a lot of people that one is a way to manage the other. Like if somebody is initially very, very anxious, the way to deal with that is at some point you just got to shut it down. And that's the depression. So the depression is not the problem. The anxiety is the problem. The depression is just the compensation. And vice versa. If somebody's really depressed and can't figure out how to do this, some anxiety can get them out of bed. Doing something. So the anxiety isn't the problem. It's the depression that's the problem in that regard. So these kind of things don't show up in the DSM. There's a whole sort of cause and effect going on in our psyche that, there's some like analytical psychologists, psychoanalytic psychology has a really pretty good handle on this process. Much more, their framework is much more, in my opinion, like the actual workings of the natural mind. So when we're doing these exercises of mindfulness and compassion, what we're really doing is that we are asking ourselves and our mind to just be as you are. We're not, in other words, we go in there and say, just, what's going on? What's happening? Where did that come from? Instead of trying to impose anything on it so we can quote-unquote figure it out, which doesn't really work anyway. So the compassion exercises are something that can bring up a lot of stuff. Dalai Lama has said that compassion is the radicalism of our time, which I really agree with. Radicals back in the 60s, the FBI were hunting them, right? The term radical is considered to be, and back then was protesters that need to be suppressed. Let's put it that way. They need to be removed, pursued, and dealt with. So radicals now, or the people who are radicals, he's saying, is everybody here. Compassion is the radicalism of our time. It's the only thing that really makes sense. And when we really understand it, and as we grow in understanding of it, then we're much better able to deal with the unbelievable shenanigans that are going on in life. I was saying to somebody we were talking about all the things, we have to kind of let go of. And I realized when they said that, is that every day I have another tidal wave of things that I need to let go of. Stuff that's going on. It's like, oh, not my deal. I can't do anything about that one. But it's like every single day, the way the world is right now. That's what's going on. We have things that it's not our job to fix, and we can't do really anything about it, per se. Or if we can, we do. So the practicing mindfulness in terms of letting go of things as they arise and not getting all tangled up in our emotions is the foundation. And then compassion is, okay, what are you going to do about it? That's the most important question. We talked about that when people, my favorite phrase is, people of good conscience and warm heart have a really difficult time, because when things happen, there's an outrage, a quiet or a loud outrage about what's going on. And when we have outrage, we have to do something about that. We can't just sit there in outrage. We're going to burn ourselves out We're going to feel helpless, and a helpless can turn into a negative frame of mind, and then that's one step away from hopelessness, the way I've talked about on a number of occasions. But it's really important to remember to avoid that at any cost. Do whatever you can to raise your... And who knows what's really going to happen? And I say frequently, the only way to reconcile ourselves with the unknown, meaning the future, is to stay in the present moment. As paradoxical as that is, the more we can stay in the present moment, the more prepared we will be if things get really out of hand. And we'll be able to do what needs to be done that we can do in the present moment when stuff happens. And so that we can act out of compassion, even though it's not going to resolve any wars. Okay, we're not going to try to stop the war in Ukraine, but we can help with wars in the family or wars in our own mind, so that. And everybody's got some shame dynamics to some degree, no matter who it is, and those are the things that that I feel are best to address when we start feeling helpless about the world. Okay, this person did that on a world scale. Now, have I ever done that to another person? Yeah. Do I feel that way about another person now? Or have I in the past? The answer to that's going to be yes. And so we get busy and start cleaning up our own feelings about that. Because if we feel the same way towards them that they feel towards other people, we're just part of the negative chain. So if we pause and go, I don't want to do that at all, and we take this right-hand turn, then we start really changing stuff. It's like, I guess it was 4 years ago, there was, stuff really kind of hit the fan. There were a lot of women started running for office, for Congress on state level and federal level, and so there's a lot more women with a really good head on their shoulders in the government now. That was their. That's not my. I have no interest in being involved in politics that directly that way, but we have to do something. And so sometimes our task is to be a mensch, which just means being a good member, a good neighbor. Being a mensch is just basically being a good person and helping people out where we can and taking care of ourselves and our loved ones as best we can. Maybe that's what is we can do. But whatever it is, compassion becomes the motivation, and that's because when we're motivated by compassion, it doesn't fail. It may take a long time, but it never fails. Okay, so that's a summation of topics that I see that we've got going on at the moment, and so I guess we'll start finding a comfortable spot, place where we can simply be still and not have to move any muscles to maintain our position. And the meditation can be done either with eyes half open or closed, whatever works for you. If the mind gets very busy, leaving the eyes half open, which means not really looking at anything, but just half open, just sort of a benign gaze, or eyes closed. Okay, so we'll begin. And following the sound of the bell into stillness, if you can. allowing ourselves just to settle, allowing the mind to settle and the body to settle. Perhaps noticing the points of contact with the chair or the floor or wherever you're sitting. And as some people have said, settling with ease into this place as best we can called the present moment. And it helps to have what's called an anchor, or some place where we can park our awareness. And that could be noticing the breath, because the body breathes all by itself and we can just observe. Or the stillness of the body. Because the body, when it's still, helps us to observe the present moment. And each time we have a thought, recognizing it as a thought, and letting it go and returning to just being. And typically we begin to settle in stages, sort of, a little bit at a time. And if we notice any tension, allowing that to flow out, flow away. And perhaps imagining for the next few minutes we don't really have to deal with anything. No problems to solve. Nothing to run away from or run toward. Nothing to achieve or suppress. Just sitting. And we may notice everything relaxing. And allowing the mind, the thinking mind, the rational mind, to take a back seat just for a little while. Just in the same way, when we see a flower, we don't have to understand the flower or ask a bunch of questions. We just experience it. Giving ourselves a little grace from the strivings, trying to work through issues with ourselves or others or the world. Letting all that go for a few moments. And whatever arises in our mind, just recognizing it as a thought and letting it go. Even if the thought is about a thought. And each time, each moment, settling a little bit more into this place called the present moment. And sort of like a stone sinking through the waters of the lake and settling on the bottom, the muddy bottom of the lake, just come to rest wakefully. And we may notice what it feels like for the body and the mind and the emotions to just be quiescent, just abiding. Giving ourselves a time out from all the difficulties and discussions that we usually go through in our brains day to day. And the thoughts may not stop arising, and that's okay, because it's not about suppressing our thoughts or getting rid of them. It's about changing how we respond to them when they do arise. Just recognizing them as a thought and letting them go and coming back, bringing our awareness back to the present moment. Whatever arises, simply recognizing and letting it go, and returning to just sitting. And if we find our mind has wandered a bit, without criticism or judgment, simply recognizing it's wandered and bringing our awareness back to home base. And allowing ourselves this respite from the contentions. And in this state of relative quiescence, even if the mind is still jumping around, it doesn't really matter. It's being aware of whatever's going on and finding some modicum of feeling settled, or at least a little distance between us and the problems of the world. Now allowing compassion to arise in whatever form makes sense to you, whether it's a light or a feeling, sense of warmth. In a sense, treating oneself as one's own best friend, someone we truly love and care about. And allowing that to arise into our being and filling us up. Every space, no matter how tiny, allowing ourselves to accept this compassion, even if we may not even understand it. And allowing it to fill us up completely. Like air in a balloon, sort of. Or like water or light coming in. Allowing as best we can this compassion to come into every aspect of our being. Every single tiny spot and location in our body. And filling us up completely. To the point it's pressing into every single aspect of our being. And that we're stretched to the limit, filled with this compassion. It could be from an old hurt, or an imagined future one, or something about our own behavior we feel badly about. Whatever it may be, allowing this compassion to be the field in which these things arise. Knowing that sometimes, even if we don't recognize it right away, what we really need, and the only thing that we need, is, at that time, compassion. And allowing ourselves to receive it. Old hurts, real or imagined. Future fears, real or imagined. When we bring them into the field of compassion, they just sort of dissolve or fall apart. And you may notice that this compassion is unlimited and inexhaustible, ever flowing, as soon as we open the gates. And filled to the brim completely, to the point of overflowing, and bringing to mind a loved one or a family member or a pet, past, present, or future. And letting this compassion radiate out to this other. And as they accept, noticing how they fill up with this compassion as we did a moment ago. And the more we send it to them, the more imbued with compassion are we. And giving just because we can, not for any particular reason, just to be compassionate. And they fill up also from toe to the top of their head. Every single nook and cranny, no matter how small, saturated in compassion. Filled to the brimming point at which they begin to send compassion from their overflow to you as well as you continue sending to them, sending and receiving at the same time. And resting in this dynamic flow, accepting it as fully as we can. and feeling this mutuality, as if there's really no difference between us and the other. And allowing ourselves to absorb this experience and the compassion itself as best we can, like water is absorbed by a sponge. So that in a moment when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day and come back to it at any time.